Friends, today we tackle a question that strikes at the very core of our faith, a mystery that haunts every soul walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Does God truly delight in your suffering? When the diagnosis is grim, when the loss is unbearable, when the setback is crushing, when every fiber of your being cries out, "Why, Lord, why me?" It is easy, tragically easy, to fall into the deep, dark misconception that God must somehow enjoy watching us break. But what if that widespread belief, that conventional wisdom about God and pain, was entirely and profoundly wrong? What if the Holy Scriptures reveal a truth about suffering that is not only radically different, but is the single most powerful key to finding hope and strength in the darkest night? Prepare to have your traditional understanding overturned, as we delve deep into the eternal Word to uncover the 5 true biblical interpretations of suffering, and witness how the refiner's fire is not meant to consume you, but to perfect you. To grasp the truth, we must first establish the foundational biblical reality. Suffering did not originate in the heart of God, but in the brokenness of a fallen world after the sin of Adam. God did not create pain, but he redeemed it. We look to the ancient story of Job, a man blameless and upright, who endured inexplicable loss. His experience shatters the simplistic, false theology that all suffering is a direct punishment for sin. Job's ordeal teaches us that sometimes pain is a battlefield where God's sovereignty is powerfully demonstrated. The New Testament, however, elevates this understanding into the promise of the New Covenant. The Apostle Paul, writing in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, ERV, gives us this divine assurance. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, those who have been called according to his purpose. This does not mean that suffering is good, but that God is actively at work within it. The cross of Jesus Christ, the ultimate example of innocent suffering, transforms all human pain from a meaningless curse into a potential tool for glorious transformation. This is the critical shift in perspective. God doesn't delight in our pain, but he is meticulously, lovingly, and powerfully committed to extracting eternal good from every single trial. Now let us peel back the layers and examine the first 3 true purposes of your suffering. The reasons the sovereign God permits the struggle, not for his enjoyment, but for your eternal gain. The first interpretation, to humble us and make us rely on him. Consider the Apostle Paul, who was granted visions of paradise, yet was afflicted with a thorn in the flesh to keep him from becoming conceited. When Paul pleaded for the removal of this agonizing trial, the Lord's answer was a definitive no, but coupled with a powerful promise in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, ERV, "My grace is enough for you, because my power is made perfect in weakness." Your deepest struggles are often the only things that shatter your self-reliance and force you onto your knees, showing you that Christ's sufficient grace is found only at the end of your own strength. The second interpretation, to make us more like Christ. Suffering is God's divine, personalized school of discipline. The author of Hebrews reminds us in chapter 12, verse 10, ERV, that earthly fathers discipline for a short time, but God disciplines us for our own good so that we may share his holiness. Christ himself learned obedience through what he suffered, and the refinement of your character, the chipping away of self-centeredness, demands the heat of the forge. Pain is the sanctifying instrument that prunes the dead branches, ensuring you bear the fruit of the Spirit. And the third interpretation, to enable us to comfort others in the future. Your present pain is not solely for your benefit. It is an investment for the community of faith. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4, ERV, Paul praises the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. The scars you carry are the credentials that qualify you to walk alongside the next person in the valley. Your pain becomes a ministry, transforming you from a receiver of comfort into a channel of God's inexhaustible compassion. These first 3 points alone should already dismantle the lie that God is a cruel overseer. He is, instead, the master alchemist of your soul. We press further now into the deeper, often overlooked purposes of affliction, moving from character refinement to eternal perspective. This brings us to the fourth interpretation, to separate us from the world's sinfulness, sanctification. The world offers fleeting comforts and temporary distractions from the reality of sin, but suffering is the sharp spiritual shock that breaks the spell of worldliness. The Apostle Peter describes this process, likening our trials to the purification of precious metals. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7, ERV, he writes that the testing of your faith, which is more valuable than gold that perishes even though it is refined by fire. will be for praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ appears. When life is too easy, we cling tightly to temporal pleasures. The loss, the illness, the rejection. These painful interruptions serve as celestial wake-up calls, reminding us that this world is not our final home and compelling us to set our affections on things above, purifying our desires and separating us from the corrupting influence of the age. And finally, the most powerful and counterintuitive truth, the fifth interpretation, to display God's glory through us. This is the ultimate divine purpose that transcends our personal feelings. Remember the man born blind in John chapter 9, verse 3, ERV? When the disciples asked if his blindness was due to his sin or his parents' sin, Jesus dismissed both, stating clearly, "He was born blind so that God's work could be shown in him." Your suffering, therefore, is not a mistake or a curse, but a platform upon which the supernatural, sustaining power of Christ can be vividly demonstrated to a watching world that expects you to crumble. When you exhibit joy amid crushing grief, peace amid chaos, and faith when hope is lost, it is God's glory, not your own strength, that shines forth, turning your temporary affliction into an eternal masterpiece of testimony. Understanding the why is crucial, but applying the how is the daily warfare of the believer. To leverage your suffering for eternal gain, you need a spiritual toolkit. First, adjust your prayer. Instead of defaulting to the purely human prayer, "Lord, remove this pain," elevate your petition to the divine level. "Lord, transform this pain. Use this furnace to refine my faith and perfect your power in my weakness." Pray for the meaning before the relief. Second, practice the perspective shift taught by James. Instead of viewing the trial as an enemy, consider it a messenger of growth, as James instructs in chapter 1, verse 2, ERV, urging us to consider it nothing but joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you meet with various trials. This is not manufactured happiness, but the deep, quiet assurance that God is at work. Third, seek out the fellowship of suffering. Do not withdraw into isolation, but actively look for opportunities to practice the comfort you have received. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4. Your lived experience of brokenness is a sacred gift that allows you to minister with authentic empathy, avoiding the common spiritual mistake of offering trite, hollow advice. See the fire not as punishment, but as the Master's refining process, equipping you with a deeper maturity and a ministry of presence that only the deeply wounded can provide. So let us dismantle the ancient lie. God does not delight in your suffering. He treasures the perfect, resilient faith that suffering produces. We have seen the 5 true biblical interpretations. The trials you face are tools to foster humility, to forge Christ-likeness, to equip you for future ministry, to separate you from the seductive pull of the world, and most profoundly, to provide a stage for God's glory to be dramatically unveiled. The furnace is hot, the pressure is immense, but the promise is unwavering. Hold fast to the truth found in James chapter 1, verse 12, ERV. Happy is the person who keeps on enduring when he is tested, for after he has proved himself, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. You are not being penalized. You are being prepared. What current struggle are you facing right now that you can choose to surrender to God's refining purpose, asking him not to remove it, but to use it to display his perfect power? Share your thoughts and your journey in the comments below, and let us uplift one another with the comfort we have received from the God of all comfort. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to seek the deeper truths of the gospel together.